Hey, Life Fixers. Hope you're having an awesome day. Are you ready to learn how to communicate correctly? Yes, we will on today's episode. Now, if you want to become more efficient and effective in your marriage, career, and everyday life, get yourself under your Brain Rewired waitlist at lifefixuniversity.com/your brain rewired to be the first to know when registration opens up again and to get a great big discount. Let's get into communication with family psychotherapist Justine Lambroschino. If I'm pronouncing that correctly, I completely messed that up. But thank you so much, Justine, for being here. I am excited to be speaking with you. You want to start by telling us something you did as a kid that your parents still joke about till today.
That's really funny that you mentioned that, because what my parents used to do was they said when I was finished my bottle in the crib that I would throw it on the floor because I was still hungry and I wanted another one.
Oh my God. Okay. So from when you were young, that was your way of communicating.
Communicator with, and it was actually what was really upsetting to them was the bottles were glass back then. So they had to put blankets on the floor in case I did that. But I was a hungry baby, and they had the schedule back then of they only fed the babies every 4 hours. So over time, they realized they had to feed me a little bit more frequently.
Oh God, I'm glad that you weren't do you think that because of that, you now have a different association with food?
Oh, I definitely feel like when I was younger, I really ate too much, but fortunately, I was a very active child. And my mother, one of the things my mother liked about me the most was that I was her only child who would eat anything.
Oh, okay. So you ate all your veggies too, not just all the candy.
I loved everything. I was a food addict and I liked it, but luckily I was very athletic and I wasn't heavy.
So good for you. Okay, let's get into communication. What do you think the biggest problem people have with communication?
I think the biggest problem people have with communication is that they're very interested in saying what they have to say, but when it comes to listening to the other person, they are usually thinking about what they still want to say instead of listening.
Okay, now we hear this all the time. Communication is so important for marriage, communication, and in order to improve, everything is communication, communication, communication. But by the end of the day, we're still talking about it because people still have such a hard time with it. So how can we switch it and have a different mindset, first of all, on communication? And then how can we actually go and communicate?
Well, there's a couple. It depends on the individuals and their lifestyle. Definitely. I mean, I frequently suggest in my couples counseling that people set a time that they commit to, because life is busy now. There's children involved, sports and all that. There's all kinds of running around the parents have to do. So I suggest that they find a time, a place that they set aside to just basically, I start out with say one speaks first, only one. And that one, like say it's the wife, she gets to speak, and then the husband, kind of repeats it and sees if he got what she said. And frequently that takes several trips to get it. And then, and no arguing is involved. No arguing is allowed. If they start to get upset, then the session is over. Because I think a lot of times people get frustrated when they're trying to listen and compete with someone else. And so I have to get that frustration piece under control. So it's a tedious type of thing. But if you start with small bites, like say 20 minutes once a week or twice a week, depending on the schedules, people kind of start to get, they kind of get into it. And then they say, oh, I know what you're talking about. And then they get excited because they've actually learned how to listen to the other, and they get happy.
So we start off by setting a timer for 10 minutes or so?
Yeah, very well. I think it has to be about 20 because there's always questions, and the husband says, well, I didn't understand that word, or you used a word I don't know, or she says, she starts to cry. There's a lot of crying, things like that. So I say 20 minutes.
Okay. So 20 minutes, let's say for the sake of example, that the wife starts talking and she's just saying whatever she's on her mind about whatever topic, let's say about the kids. She's talking and talking. And then when she finishes, then the husband repeats back what she just said.
Well, that's one way of doing it. Some people can't really do that, but that's a good way to start, to try to repeat. I heard you say this. And then usually the wife will say, well, whoever was first will say, well, that's close, but that's not exactly what I meant. And then she repeats, and they try to get it really honed down. And then usually in the beginning, there's frustration. And so then they start to get upset. And that's when they say, now stop, just stop. And then we'll think about it and go back to it at the next appointed time. And in the meantime, they may talk about it on the side too. But the whole point of it is to do it in a controlled manner where there is no frustration and anger.
Okay, so if they stop in middle and they just stop like right away and gets frustrated in the middle of a conversation, it just stays there hanging until their next session.
Like I said, they'll probably talk about it on the side. It all depends. Now, this is another aspect that I have to go through to be clear about this. It depends on how bad the communication deterioration has gotten. If there's a lot of anger or on one person's side, or a lot of sadness on the other person's side, that can make it even more complicated. So when I do my initial visit with a couple, I try to find out if there's some old hurts that are festering, things like that, problems, trauma, losses, children sick, something like that. Because if there's other circumstances going on, the communication may be interrupted because they're worried or upset about something else. So if that comes up in the original session, I see whatever partner needs to be seen. I see maybe them alone and then see the other one alone, so we can get the ideas going a little bit clearer. If they're, really gung-ho of wanting to get together and wanting to communicate, you can do it a little bit quicker. But most of the time, there are underlying issues that need to be addressed.
And those underlying issues usually are like outside factors, like something with a child, with a different family member, or usually something that has to do with the actual relationship?
Well, it's usually, what I would call it is a hurt, some kind of a hurt. For example, I could say in one situation, there had been a lot of moving situations where they had moved quite a bit. And one of the partners was having a lot harder time making the adjustments to the moving. Whereas the other partner was like, oh, I love change. This is fun, la, la, la. But, the other person was struggling. So the moving thing had to be addressed. And she had to, it was a woman who was grieving. And she kind of was mad at her husband because he thought moving was such a blast. And he had a hard time taking it seriously because he didn't take it. He wasn't hurt by it. So that was another whole depth of a thing of saying, just because something doesn't hurt you doesn't mean that your wife isn't actually feeling this pain. And even if you don't see why she can't adjust, you still have to give her some space to adjust and grieve the loss.
So what did he do to him? Like what type of exercises or speak to him about to show him that, like what you just said, that you have to give her that space to grieve the loss?
Well, basically what I basically have to say, maybe it would be a good idea for you not to comment on the well, how did I say it? Something like to the depth of what your wife's grief is. Maybe you should not minimize it. Or maybe you should just say, I hear what you're saying and I'm sorry. Instead of trying, men frequently try to talk women out of their feelings. And the fact of the matter is nobody can be talked out of their feelings. And so the best thing to do is to just be present and be quiet. If you can't say anything supportive or if you can't identify. And later on, as time goes by, you can say, I really wish I could understand how you feel. I know you feel this way and I can see you're suffering, but I just don't understand it. And that's a human quality. Sometimes you just can't live in another person's shoes. At that point, sometimes I would suggest a personal therapist for herself to do her grieving.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so let's say they've been practicing this exercise of doing once or twice a week, a timer for 20 minutes, each of them taking time to talk and the other one to listen. What comes afterwards? At what point could they talk about anything without having to set a time for it? Or does it just stay with set times forever afterwards?
No, well, the thing is, if they're doing this during the week and then they have an appointment with me in the interim, so I get to coach them when they come in for their session with me. And so I will say, well, how did it go? And then one will say, well, this happened, that happened. And then I'll say, did this really happen? And they'll say, yeah, I really messed up. And so then they start taking ownership of what happened in these sessions. And as they take ownership, they get more invested in trying to make it work. And so I give hints, or I might do some. I might, for example, play the part of the wife and listen and tell him how I felt. Maybe making up words that I think she might say, and then I'd ask him to respond. And then after we responded, if I felt it was helpful, I would say so. But if I said, gee, maybe that was a kind of a nasty word, or that little smile and laugh when you said that didn't really seem supportive, and I'll point out a few things like that. And also, I strongly expect people to withhold anger, because anger never lets communication happen right.
So and do you have any tips for that?
Well, I suggest exercise. That is the main thing. If you're going to have a session with your wife and you've had a rough day and you're going to have to get into a room and talk to your wife for 20 minutes about, grieving or loss of a parent or whatever it could be, it's a good idea to get outside and take a walk before you get down to session.
Oh, yeah.
Or have a big glass of water. I just use very simple coping skills to calm yourself down. But make sure that you don't go into a session with your wife if you haven't eaten, or if you haven't been to the bathroom, or if you need some exercise, or if you need to change into comfortable clothes. You have to do some preparation for these things. You can't just jump in and say, oh, I'm going to listen to you for 20 minutes and figure it all out. No, that's not how it happens. You have to prepare it. Think of making sure that you're comfortable in the situation, each person.
Yeah, so I see you're really good at like those simple things that we assume people will know. Like if you're hungry, then you're going to have a much harder time listening, or if you need to go to the bathroom or something, and you just help people, like remind them, I guess, or show them in case they didn't really think of it before, that like it might be a good idea to go on a walk before you actually go and sit down in a room. Or even just from the things that you were pointing out, like that smile, that we assume and hope that people will know that, but some people don't.
And if there's children involved, you want to make sure that their kids are occupied, either maybe with a grandparent or playing in the yard with visually you can see them, but you don't have them listening to you, because the parents don't want the children to be involved in this type of a session.
Yes. Okay. So they're coming back to you now. They're continuing these sessions for about how long with themselves? Like how many weeks does it usually take?
Well, that's really difficult to say. I would say after about 4 weeks, they start feeling progress, and we might go on to a different exercise. Good understanding of each other. Then I would say, okay, all right. So then and maybe the woman has gone to a couple of sessions about her specific grief item. Then get them back together and say, now, can you talk about this grief item, like with your husband now? And can you listen to her and accept that her grief is different than yours, and that she has to feel this and she wants to tell you about it? Can you listen respectfully? And then usually by then he can. At least he can make a stab at it.
Even this is talking about during the time sessions, not like randomly throughout the day.
Maybe we would try it with me being there. We could try to start working on it, and see how it went. If it went really well, then we might move on to something else. Or if they're still having trouble with it, I said, well, do you guys feel like doing this on your own, or do you want to just keep practicing the general things until you feel more? She might say, I don't want to talk to him about it yet. And that's fine. She can, setting boundaries is another thing that a lot of couples don't do. because like, oh, you're my wife, I can tell you anything, I can say anything, I can do anything. Well, that's true, and you're very close, and you're very, involved with each other. But there are some things that have to be said. I really don't need that type of stimulation right now, or jokes about this or that. I'm upset, and I don't want to hear that. And and I'm not sure, this isn't a bad thing. A lot of guys like make jokes and try to make their wife laugh and stuff like that. But sometimes that's not appropriate. Maybe it's just not like, you can't laugh myself. I can't laugh this out of my wife. She needs help with this.
Right. There's a time and place for everything. And sometimes jokes help you in not such, when you're not in a good mood and you need to be lifted. And sometimes those things are like, no, right now I just need to grieve. I just need to talk. I just need to cry, and I needed to listen. That's it.
Even listening to being told a boundary sometimes is difficult for people to take, because, the word boundary is pretty well lavished around lately, but, and then a lot of couples, they say, well, I want to set a boundary here. And then the person will, get mad or get offended. And, boundaries are for safety. They're not for, to push you out or to make you not a part of. They're just to make you a safe space for a certain amount of time.
Yeah, I like to say boundaries are good for the person setting the boundaries and the person and for everyone else around them, for whoever else is affected by the boundaries. Even though it may be hard and you might say like, hey, why are they putting this boundary here? By the end of the day, it ends up being better for both people. So I'm going back, before you mentioned how men don't like crying and they don't like being around crying. And I actually had someone recently, like a guy who's dating, and I was talking to him, and he was talking about a different friend who was like, he broke up, like he went on a date and he broke up with her, and she sat there in his car just crying and crying and crying, and he had no idea what to do with you. He like felt bad, like he knew they had this really good connection and they had a really good relationship, but it wasn't for him. They're just like, he's like, he couldn't see this going any further, and he's like, where do you want to go? I'll take you out to eat. We'll go out, like we'll go do something, we'll have fun, like thing. And this girl was just sitting there and crying, and he just didn't know what to do. So I asked him, I was like, what's going to happen when your wife is going to cry? Because she most probably will. And he was like, I don't know. My dad just walks out of the room when my mom cries. And I was like, ouch. What do you say about that?
Well, so this is a couple that that's already married?
No, I was speaking to a guy who's not married. He's dating. And he was saying how girls are so emotional, and every girl he dates is like, he doesn't like all the emotions going on there. And then he told me a story about his friend who was on a date and broke up on the date, and this girl was just crying and crying and crying. And he was like, I don't know what I would do in that situation. And I wasn't really sure what to tell him, because I'm not a guy and I don't know how much guys think about crying, but I was like, he's going to have to learn how to deal with that if he's going to want to get married.
Right. Well, first of all, if he's breaking up with a girl and she's crying in his car, I think he should drive her home and let her be with her mother or her sister or her friends.
So apparently they were sitting in front of her house when he told her that, and she was just sitting in her car, and she was just like so emotional about it that she just like couldn't.
So he could go to the door and ring the bell and ask the mother to come out. Because I don't think it's a good idea for him to say, well, let's go for dinner and have fun. Because she's not in a place to go for dinner and have fun. She needs to get out of that car and into her house with her mother or with her sister or call her friends. Because he, like you said, he didn't know what to do. And the best thing to do was to get him into the hands of someone who could speak with her and she could be open with.
Okay, so let's go back now to a couple who that's their home, that's their safe place, but the husband doesn't like when the wife cries.
Well, most men will do anything to get the crying to stop. So they might offer a gift or whatever. I can't really, in my opinion, as a woman, I would like to be just quietly stay with him, stay with the woman and just let her cry. And then after a while say, is there anything I can do, or are you ready to talk? And if she said, no, there's nothing I can do, or I'm not ready to talk, then he could say, well, I really need to go downstairs and, watch a football game or something, because I just, I'm really hurting and I don't know what to do. And just be honest and vulnerable to her. And he says, and he could say, and I'll come back in 10 or 15 minutes and just check on you. Or would you like me to call your girlfriend to come over? Or would you like to talk to your mother? Or, and maybe she just needs to cry. Crying is not necessarily a bad thing. It can be a good thing.
Yeah.
And then after this episode, I think he should talk with his wife or girlfriend and say, let's try to make a plan of what we can do if I hurt you, or if you're hurting and you're crying and I don't know what to do. Let's see if we can figure out a plan of what we want to do. Maybe we want to, put a certain type of music on, or a movie we both like, or something, just to make it like they could be together. But if she's crying and he doesn't know what to do, he can get into a panic, and he might, say something really stupid. So the best thing for him to do is to be kind, be available, but get out of there for a little bit of a while, and off and on, and check on her.
So you are saying that it's a good idea to leave this space, because he was saying that his father just leaves when his mother cries. And I thought that wasn't. So
well, I think just is different than saying, sitting with her for a while and saying, I understand you're upset. Is there anything I can do? Let me bring you a cup of tea, something like that. And then let him get away for a while. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I think he should at least let her know that, he needs a break, and he's going to get her a cup of tea, or just watch the news for half an hour, and I'll come right up and check on you then. If she has mental illness, or if she's depressed, I don't know if I might stay with her. I don't know. This
every situation's different, but in general, yeah. Do you think that men ever cry like that? Or I should say men do cry, but when men cry, what do they want?
I think if they're crying, they have no idea that they didn't want to cry. So I think that they're certainly upset. Yes. And I think it's real. And I think, it's just a natural thing to cry, but a lot of people hold it back. But, I think men cry more now than they maybe would have 10 or 15 years ago. I'm not sure about that, but I see, men cry about, their children. They cry about their wives. They get all upset about pregnancy and all that stuff. There's a lot of men crying out there.
Yeah, for this putting labels on people and boxes. I this is like an interesting thing. I know men, we just said, crying could be a really good thing. Crying is a release of an emotion, and when we need to cry, we don't want to stop ourselves from crying. Just from experience of working with other people and seeing people, sometimes I see crying being used like almost as a weapon. Like if somebody thinks that people only listen to them when they cry, they tend to cry more, or they'll get whatever they want when they cry, then they'll end up crying more. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, that's called manipulation.
Yes. Okay. So when someone's on the other side of it, they're not crying, they're seeing someone who cries and who cries to manipulate people, or passive aggressive, or however you want to call it, then what could they do to help the other person, but not fall into their trap?
I think if they know the person well enough that they know the woman is using her crying to manipulate or to get an outcome she wants, I think the person would have to say, we've been through this before. I see that you're crying, and I want to believe that you're really upset, but I have to be honest with you. I can't change my decision because you're crying. We can't afford a new car right now, or I can't go to that event with you. I'm sorry, I'm already tied up with work, something like that. And again, we're going to have to use the word boundary. The person who is being asked to do something, and his significant other is trying to force him to do it by being upset and crying, is something where he's going to say, I really want to be your partner and I really want to love you, but I said, I can't make this change. I've got to say no here. I have to set a strong boundary. And eventually, hopefully, she will understand that that's not the way to make decisions in a relationship.
Yes. Eventually she will, if the boundaries are actually put every single time and there's no like wishy-washy. That's the hard part about doing boundaries, because they feel so hard to put into place, and you have to keep to your word and keep to what you committed to yourself, to that boundary that you made, no matter what happens.
Well, nobody's perfect. And, sometimes things are different. So you can make it. That's the whole thing with life. Nothing is black and white.
Right.
Nothing perfectly. She may be a big manipulated crier, but then, maybe that day her dog got run over and she really didn't want her husband to go to work and she needed him home. So, you never know. And that's why everything is a judgment call. And that's why forgiveness is such a big part of marriage, because there's so much forgiving and letting go that you have to do. It's not about anyone becoming perfect.
Oh, yes. Okay. So what is your favorite quote?
About marriage?
In general.
Oh my favorite quote. I should have my Instagram open. I don't know.
Okay, no worries.
I can't think of one.
No problem. Okie dokie. Okay, so where could Life Fixers connect with you and learn more about you before we get to our final question?
I have a website, jlambroschino.com. And I'm on social media, which is, Twitter, Instagram. And I don't usually use my Facebook. I use that mostly for friends, but not for work. And I have an office and I do therapy with couples, and family work is my favorite type of therapy. But I've done.
Why is it your favorite? And just out of curiosity.
Well, as I said, when I was younger, I did everything. I did mental illness, medical problems, all kinds of things. I did everything. And then as I got more experienced, I found that my skills were best with couples and families. I like that. And I don't like to work with the children so much as the children in the family system, not, because a lot of times when I saw children without the parents being involved, the parents kind of felt like I was going to fix their child and send them back. And that doesn't work. So it has to be in a family situation or a couple situation. It works best for me. But I do see individuals, for the adjustment disorders, transitions, things like that. Well, I do see individuals and I have, I guess I'm on, online and my name and stuff like that. See if you need to get to my office and my insurances and all stuff like that.
Amazing. So I'll put all the information in the show notes so everyone will be able to go and find it. And for our final question, how would you describe an extraordinary relationship without using love, trust, or communication?
What I would think people would need for a wonderful relationship would be common interests and beliefs. Not if you having, say, for example, if you're a firm believer in spirituality, it's very difficult to live with someone who doesn't believe in that. So I think having a spiritual or a value system that is the same is very helpful. Also, I think health. If one person is a healthy person and exercises and eat right, and the other one doesn't, it makes a lot of conflict. That's a big thing too. And the other thing,
interesting. Usually it's like money, not health. Okay, I like that.
I don't really believe in money managing much, because I think it's not a good baseline for anything. The third thing I think that would be interesting to make a relationship good is how you feel about other people, including family. Do you want your family all over the place and friends around all the time? Or do you want to have like a nice little quiet home of your own and, be with each other and then schedule people time? Because I think a lot of times one person wants people over all the time and the other person is like overwhelmed with that. So I think it's the amount of interaction with social time is important, I think, as well. Those three things.
They're really beautiful. They're a little bit different than what we usually hear. So I like that. I like that so very much. Thank you so much, Justine, for being here. It was great speaking to you. And I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you. It was nice meeting you. And I appreciate you taking the time.
That's all for this episode of the Life Fix University podcast, but I have a huge favor to ask of you that will not only support the show, but will also help the people you love most. We are striving for 1 million downloads by the end of 2025, and we can't do this without your help. If you love this episode, please share it with 2 of your family and friends so they too can rewire their brains to have an extraordinary marriage. It was awesome spending time with you, and I'll see you on the next episode.